everyone, got the Tisas NightStalker. Anyway, like some of the videos I've done recently, I'm not going to sit here and go through, heights, widths, lengths, all of that kind of good stuff. I just want to talk about this. That is something that you can find out really quick on the website. Read it in about 10 seconds, 15 seconds max. We're just going to talk about how awesome this gun is. And yes, we have shot it. Yes, we do have range content to come if it's not already up. And just want to talk about the gun itself, and I'm sure you can appreciate that as well. $500 at PSA. It was $529.99. They gave my wife a what is it called, first responder discount. For me, I got out the door with $500 for this gun, and even at $529, it's definitely well worth that price. Did have it at the range yesterday. If I remember correctly, we put about, I don't know if Trey can correct me if this is not accurate, but I'm wanting to say we put somewhere in the neighborhood of about 130 rounds through this gun. Completely flawless, no break-in. It might have been more than that actually. No break-in, flawless from shot one. Did not have any issues to speak of, no failures to feed. Accurate as all get out. Trey shot a little more accurately than I did. The only issue that we had was that one of the grip panel screws did get loose. Very common. That happened on my TRP and it was $1,600. That happened on my Springfield Echelon and it was $1,200. Definitely not something to go jumping off a cliff over. And the set screw in the rear sight here walked out a little bit. The sight did not move. It did not get loose at all. Not even sure the set screw has to be there because that sight is really dovetailed in there right. So when I got home and I was cleaning it last night, put a little lock, took all the screws out, cleaned underneath the grip panels here, and I did put a little dab of blue Loctite on those screws. Also did the same thing with the set screw on the rear sight. Tightened everything down to specs. Don't suspect there'll be another problem. Other than that, completely and utterly flawless at the range. Listen, like I said in one of the one of the shorts that we did, if you got all of these features in a Springfield or a Kimber or a 6 Sauer or a Dan Wesson or any of those others, you would be anywhere from $1,500 to maybe even $3,000 for one of those guns. The reason I'm not talking about material and barrel material and all of this other stuff is because I genuinely don't care. It's a $500 gun. Maybe I would be concerned about MEM parts if it was a $2,000 or a $3,000 gun or my Dan Wesson or one of those. Maybe I would be concerned about that, but I genuinely just don't care. Let's start down here at the bottom. We already have a flared beveled mag well here. Again, not something you see on every 1911 stock out of the box that you buy. Does have front strap checkering, has rear checkering. Front strap checkering seems to be something that your Springfields and others of the world can't seem to pull off. They're just smooth on the front. You have no feeling of grippiness on the front, and your hand wants to slide down as you're shooting it. And it don't even matter on their Ronin 10 millimeters. It doesn't matter what round you're shooting through it. It has no front strap checkering, but this does. It has the front strap checkering, the rear checkering, the beveled flared magwell extension here. Comes with 2 magazines, aluminum grip panels on here. Very nice. They are slick. They're not G10, but man, it made no difference for us at the range yesterday. It makes it super comfortable to hold in the hand, and a 1911 is already comfortable to hold, but those aluminum smooth surface grip panels there make it all the more comfortable to hold. And it is just, let's face it, it's sexy, right? So let's move it on up. We have your standard trigger guard here that you see in a 1911. Does have a plastic trigger, but it is serrated on the front. But my Echelon that cost me $1,300 also has a plastic trigger, so let's not go beating them over the head about that. has a light rail. Again, something that some of your Kimbers and your Springfields of the world for $900 or $1,000 can't seem to pull off a light rail for you, right? Again, $500. I'll mention that quite a few times through this video. It has a vintage slide, and it's not gawky. It looks nice. You can see the black barrel through the vents, kind of sticking with that whole NightStalker thing, right? Has a vintage slide here. Also has a front orange, my favorite, night sight. Again, you ain't getting no night sights on your Ronins and Garrisons of the world, right? That are costing you $8, $9, or maybe even $1,000, depending on where you are at. It has this very tactile, ambidextrous safety on here that's very easy to manipulate. You know that I am a little bit of a snob about safeties on my 1911, and it positively locking into place. It absolutely does that without issue. Again, it is a ambi safety, and the mag release. Let me get my magazine here. This gun is not loaded, but this magazine does have ammunition in it. But for purposes, I am able to manipulate that with, it's got serrations on the front of the mag button here, and it does stick off nicely off of the side of the gun, and I am able to manipulate that without changing my grip very much. I got a little bit of a grip change, but it's a nicely placed mag release. No problems whatsoever with that. The rear sight is just simply blacked out and serrated. One thing that I'll say about the sight system. Now, Trey said it kind of reminded him a little bit of the Hellcat Echelon, what have you, and it kind of sort of does, except for that this front sight fills the notch in this rear sight perfectly. There's nothing on either side for you to measure, okay, I got perfect distance between the rear U-notch with my front sight is perfectly, left to right is perfect, up and down is perfect. It completely fills it. Now, with that being said, me shooting other guns and that not being the case, it took me a little longer to figure that out with my eyes than it did for Trey. Trey seemed to figure it out pretty quick and was shooting lights out with the thing. So I know that the thing can be very, very accurate. Handled recoil like a boss. I'm telling you, watch the range video. Handled the recoil like an absolute boss. And the thing for me, as you guys know that have watched the channel before, you know that I'm a little bit of a gun snob when it comes to the finishes on my firearms. I'm a little bit OCD when it comes to how something looks. Typically, I'm not a huge fan of a colored gun. Your FDEs and your Apocalypses of the world. I'm generally not a fan of that, but I'm almost never a fan of it on a budget-friendly gun because it seems that's where they slacked on, like your Rock Islands of the world, where you can hear a Rock Island rust on a quiet night. So on Trey's M&P 2.0 10mm that we were shooting yesterday, where the brass spent casings eject, you can see where it has kind of roughed up the slide on his M&P, and M&P has the melanite finish, a very, very good finish that holds up quite well. We have put a good many rounds through that gun, and it kind of has, it hasn't nicked it down to the bare metal, but it's roughed up the finish here. Well, you could also see where the spent casings was hitting this firearm, and it's little to no effect on the finish at all. So us racking the slide, us using the gun, when I was putting it back together last night and I slammed my slide lock or takedown pin back into place, it even hit the slide a little bit and like, ew, grit your teeth a little bit. Didn't do anything to the finish. So far, again, this may be something I have to report later down the road, but so far the finish seems impeccable. And I usually will ask my wife, because she usually don't really have an opinion about functionality and stuff of the gun. She just like, yeah, man, that looks good. Like, but if she says, oh man, that's sexy, and she reaches out and asks to hold it, then that is my go-to as to whether or not it's actually sexy. and it is actually very, very sexy. It is a very sexy gun. It has this oversized injection area here, and again, some of your more budget friendly $800-900 1911s can't seem to pull that off. Nice extended beaver tail safety, grip safety here, skeletonized hammer. Again, if I were to keep this gun, and I'm not going to sell a Tisas again. Every Tisas I've had has been absolutely great. I don't know. Said the same thing about my Echelon, but the trigger's always been fine. I've never replaced it. I would drop a skeletonized trigger in here, an aluminum trigger. Maybe not. I don't know. If I did, I would keep it black to stay with the whole NightStalker thing they got going on here. Trigger, just as you would expect, it is a 1911 trigger. A little bit of take up, like on any 1911. Hits a wall, breaks immediately. There's no roll through. It's a very defined wall. Has a tiny little bit of grit on the progression back towards the reset. I will say that, and I think that's again probably because it's plastic. Once it resets, it's got a little bit more take up. So the reset is very tactile and audible, and it's pushing back on your finger. It's very tactile, but then after it resets, you have a little bit of a take up again before it hits that very defined wall and breaks, right? So it resets, you have a little bit of take up. I don't know if the take up is because the reset is so tactile when it's pushing back on my finger that my finger's naturally going forward, and that's why it has the take up after the reset. I'm trying my best not to let it do that. Yeah, but it has a very tiny bit of take up after it resets, but it's a 1911 trigger. It's still heads and shoulders above most any, if not every, polymer frame trigger, except for maybe some of your Walthers and maybe even Canon. But let's just, in comparison, let me get my emissary out here, and let's just look at the trigger on it, because it is very similar looking. So yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of take up in that trigger too. After it resets, got a little bit of take up, not nearly as much. So the emissary trigger does not have as much take up as the trigger on the NightStalker did. Hits a defined wall and it breaks. Okay, reset is likely maybe a little bit shorter. Does have a little take up after the reset. No grip whatsoever. However, we have shot this gun a ton more than we have shot this gun, so I can only assume that it's going to get much better with time. So it's definitely a little bit more take up than it was on the emissary. Hits a defined wall and it does break. Reset, I would say it's probably about the same. Then it does take up a little bit more after the reset. Defined wall and it breaks. Again, it's a trigger, guys. I don't care as much about, oh, it's got a bunch of MIM parts in it. That, again, trying to, in my mind, I'm envisioning what people are, if they were talking, what they're sending over in the comments, what they might sound like. I don't know. They probably don't sound like that at all. I probably sound like that. But it's got a bunch of MIM parts in it. It's $500. And it was lights out at the range. Honest, before God, it was probably the smooth. We had a TAC Op 6 hour out there shooting yesterday, and I enjoyed shooting this. The recoil response and everything, I enjoyed shooting this more than I did that. So let's say one of the MIM parts breaks on me. It was $500. Most of the parts inside of this gun are relatively inexpensive. If you have even the slightest little bit of mechanical inclination about you, you can replace most of the parts in here, and most of them are relatively cheap, even on your more expensive 1911. So, okay, if something breaks, what if $500? Told you I would say that a lot. Anyway, had a ton of fun. Please go over, check out the range video on this. If it's up yet, if it's not, it will be soon. Can't say nothing but good things about this gun. Make sure you tell your friends and family where they can find the most honest, down-to-earth, blue-collar reviews on YouTube. Check out our website at www.gsquaredtactical.com. We got a place on there where all of our videos, or our most recent videos, are on there. Coming soon, we're going to have some gear, some merchandise for sale. If you want to check that out, make some suggestions of what you might would want to see, definitely encourage you to do that. Again, make sure you subscribe. It's the only way we can keep doing this. Hit that thumbs up and be blessed, and have a great day.